Welcome to Circle's Big View, virtual edition. Today our topic is increasing incarceration in NWA, and this is part of our ongoing Becoming Visible series. We're focusing on this topic today because it is a relevant and pressing issue in our community. And there's been a lot of talk specifically about the jail expansion. So tonight I want us to be able to have a conversation about the problem of increasing incarceration and why a jail expansion would have a negative impact on our mission of building community to end poverty. So I'm going to level set by taking us all back, and we're going to go through a timeline of how we got to where we are now. So let's start in 2005. This is when the newest county jail opened. This new facility added 470 new beds, which almost tripled what our county had at the time, and took us up to a little over a 700 bed capacity. By 2014, just 9 years later, the jail again started to get full, and we began to see calls for another jail expansion. And by 2019, we saw a proposal presented to the Jails Committee of our county government for a $38 million jail expansion to be funded through two separate sales tax increases. However, there was significant pushback by the community to another jail expansion, and rightly so. When it comes to incarceration rates, Arkansas is literally off the charts. What this chart is saying is that if Arkansas was its own nation, we would be incarcerating a higher percentage of our population than any other democratic country in the world. So our percentage is even higher than the United States, which is already off the charts on its own. So from the get-go, Arkansas already incarcerates a lot of people. With the community pushback, the jail committee voted to postpone the proposal and opted instead to use $60,000 of taxpayer money to commission a study from the National Center for State Courts, NCSC, to study our jail population and causes for overcrowding. One thing that really stood out about the report was that much of the overcrowding in the jail was due to an increased rate of incarceration for FTAs. FTA stands for failure to appear and occurs when a defendant does not appear for their court date as scheduled. When this happens, a warrant is issued for their arrest, and if they're picked up for a traffic violation or come in contact with law enforcement in another way, then they're arrested and they're taken to jail where they're held waiting for their court date. So two big findings of the report were that FTAs were the fastest growing segment of the jail's population, posing a major burden on the system, and that the county really needed to find solutions such as pretrial services that would improve court appearance rates and reduce the number of FTA detainees. Yet our county government ignored these findings, and when COVID relief monies flowed into the county in 2021, they attempted to use these COVID relief funds for a jail expansion. As a note, the federal Treasury guidelines for the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act funds, they very clearly stipulate that jail expansion is not an eligible use of the COVID relief funds. So last year, they circled back to the 2029 proposal of funding a jail expansion through two sales tax increases. But now the budget had grown from $38 million to $113 million. In November, the ballot initiative was put before voters, but it failed, almost 60-40. Voters said no. When it failed, the next month, the quorum court circled back to these COVID relief funds and passed two separate ordinances to designate ARPA funds to the jail expansion. One is for $10 million and another is for $8.8 million. Their rationale was that voters voted no to a sales tax increase, not to a jail expansion. So that brings us to where we are now. One way that we, the people, have to express dislike of a decision by our county government is to seek signatures for a referendum. In this case, around 8,000 signatures are needed to allow voters to again vote on these two ordinances. Lots of people in the community have been out collecting signatures for the past month, and the deadline to submit signatures is February 21st. We'll talk more about collecting signatures later tonight, but before we move into our time of discussion, I want to dive a little deeper into the report finding around FTAs, as this is one of the main reasons that we as circles are involved in this issue. Once someone is arrested for failure to appear, a judge will set their bail amount. Sometimes people face what are called buried alive bonds, which are in extreme amounts of $25,000, $50,000, even $100,000. Judges are supposed to take people's financial situations into account when they set a bail amount, but the NCSE report noted that this is not very common. But for tonight, let's look at a scenario where a judge sets bail at $1,500. Arkansas regulations require a 10% bond premium must be paid if a person is using a bail bond company. So in this case, it would be $150 plus fees to bond out. But what we see happen in this type of scenario is that there is a divergent path around economic ability to pay money bail. For person A, for example, they are able to find funds to pay the $150 bond premium and therefore avoid pretrial jail time. They can return home and to work while awaiting their court date. Person B, on the other hand, is not able to find the funds because they cannot come up with $150 to pay the bond premium. Therefore, they must wait in jail for their court date. Now, person B is being held in jail pre-trial, which means they are awaiting trial but legally innocent. There has not been any conviction or admission of wrongdoing yet. The national trend is that the majority of people detained in jail are there pre-trial. In our county jail, the NCSE report showed FTAs increasing each year. This graph shows the growth in number of inmates with FTA as their most serious charge from 2013 to 2019. Why is it that so many people are being detained pre-trial? The answer, because they are not wealthy enough to afford money bail. Definitely not when it is set at $50,000, but even when it is $1,500. Person B, with the inability to find funds, will sit in jail pre-trial awaiting their court date. And it's very expensive to house people in jail while they await their court date, around $96 per person per day. We are also jailing a lot of people who are not likely to get the help they need while sitting in jail. People in jail are 8 times more likely to have a substance use disorder and 5 times more likely to have a serious mental illness. There are also a lot of people experiencing homelessness, and this is an expensive way to house someone. Our Crisis Stabilization Unit, the CSU, which just reopened finally last year, only has a 16-bed capacity. Now, we all know that the population in NWA is growing, and this is often cited as a reason that we need to expand the jail. But the NCSE report showed that the jail population growth in our county is actually growing even faster than the overall population. And this is a trend nationally too. Jail capacity in the US has tripled since the 1970s, whereas the population has less than doubled. With all these trends, the NCSE report issued a warning that instead of 10 years from now, looking at these forecasts of the jail population and saying, man, we really predicted those numbers correctly. We did a good job with that. They said, instead, we need to look at this forecast and read these numbers to say, if nothing changes, there will be continued significant pressure to expand the jail. So if nothing changes, the forecast, this line in orange, shows the steep climb that we're going to see. But the report showed a new forecast of what could happen if pretrial services were offered, this green line. And it's pretty dramatic, the difference that we see. So we want our county to consider these alternatives before spending a lot of money and continuing on this upward trend of increasing incarceration. So how can you get involved? With Circle's Big View, there's a clear action step right now. We need help collecting signatures. We need to collect 8,000 signatures total from Washington County voters by the deadline of February 21st. To find out more information or to get a clipboard with signature sheets, you can contact us at info@circlesnwa.org, or you can reach out to arkansasjusticereform@gmail.com. They're coordinating a lot of the signature events. Again, the deadline to collect signatures is February 21st. Thank you for joining our Big View event.